Support for the show comes from Carolina Forward, a nonpartisan organization dedicated to building a more equitable, democratic, and prosperous North Carolina.
You can learn more about their vision and values at carolinaforward.org.
North Carolina State Highway Patrol.
What cigarette do you smoke, Doctor?
A contributing factor to our juvenile delinquency of today.
Rock and roll has got to go.
And welcome back to the Hometown Holler. I'm Daniel Ayers.
And I'm Quinn Ray. Well, hey, man.
I am not allergic to bees.
That is a good thing.
Yeah,
how'd you learn that?
I learned that at 8 o'clock this morning when I got stung by a hornet.
Okay.
Yeah, it's been a while since I've been stung by a bee, so I actually wasn't even sure what was happening. I went out on the porch to have my coffee.
Okay.
Just like a normal American. And I sat down, and I had not sat down but for maybe 30 seconds when, I had just like this burning pain in my thigh. And I was like, what
Weird
the hell?
place.
It was, I can't even describe the pain. It was like, it hurt so bad. And I looked down, and there.
Did you see the culprit?
I did. No, it was this giant, like one of them Japanese fuckers, right?
Whoa.
Like that, I'm talking this giant, big.
Yeah.
This thing was the length of, like a thumb drive.
Sure. So was it a sting or was it the bite?
It was a sting.
Okay.
Yeah. It was, and that's what was kind of wild about it. It was like a nature documentary. Like I could see this thing trying to sting me. And so I was on my phone scrolling, so I knocked it off my leg and ran in the house, and I did some research later. So first of all, I took a Benadryl.
Okay.
Did the whole triage first aid thing, made sure I wasn't going to shock or anything, didn't need an EpiPen.
Didn't have the Migral ending.
I was fine, ultimately. 30 minutes goes by, and it hurts like hell, but I'm not, my leg isn't swelling up, right?
Yeah.
So I go online. Did you know that hornets have photographic memory?
Well, he's coming for you again.
But here's the thing. Actually, so I got a photo of this. This hornet spent the next 6 hours at my window, on my window at eye level. You can go online, folks. Go online and you can read this. Hornets remember you because when they attack you, they release like a pheromone that alerts other hornets in their nest to go into attack mode.
Yeah.
And they remember the perpetrators. They've evolved to have that. Yeah, and they don't do it forever. I think it's like a 3-week window or something like that.
I would just lock myself in your room, and I wouldn't go out for the next 3 weeks.
Oh no, I left through the back door. I did not. I'm not rolling those dice anyway. So the mo you know.
The mo you know.
See what I did there? That's the segue.
I put some puns in this intro, too.
I was going to say,
excited.
We're about to introduce our guest, Mo Green. And before we even introduce you, I just have to ask, are you tired of the puns? Do you love the puns? What's your stance on puns?
Puns are fine.
Thank you.
Absolutely. More the merrier.
That's great. Okay, good.
Did you catch that one?
No, that was golden. That was excellent. I'm a friend of the pun.
Yes.
But not everybody is, but we're so happy that you are. So on today's episode, folks, we're joined by Mo Green. He's running to become North Carolina's next state superintendent of public instruction. Very important job.
Yes.
Very important job. A proud Duke University alumnus, Mo holds both a law degree and undergraduate degrees in political science and economics. So he's smart. I was an econ major once. Yeah, I did not complete that track. Mo has served as the superintendent of Guilford County Schools. That's the third largest school district in North Carolina. It's a big one, where he improved academic performance and graduation rates. And as I've heard him say before, he also had a big emphasis on character.
That's right.
Character really counted under Mo's leadership there. He also led the Z. Smith Reynolds Foundation, directing major grants toward public education. You were also, if I remember correctly, counsel for the Charlotte Mecklenburg school system. Is that right?
That is correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
So today we're super excited to dive into Mo's vision for the future of public education here in North Carolina, and how he plans to make the grade if elected. There we go. All right. So Mo, welcome to the Hometown Holler.
Thank you. My pleasure to be here.
So to start it off, it's Maurice Green.
That's correct.
Where did Mo come from?
Yeah, so great question. I think somewhere when I moved to Georgia, folks started saying Mo a little bit.
Okay.
But then when I got to college is when it actually stuck. And I
Okay.
think Mo has been short for Maurice, been used as a short
Yeah.
nickname for Maurice before. And so,
So it wasn't a childhood thing. Mama didn't call you that.
no. Well, let's be abundantly clear that Mama never called me Mo.
Okay.
No.
And just never, like not even.
I can't ever remember a time
Yeah.
that she called me Mo. And so, and it would stand out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess if she wanted to call you Mo, she would have named you Mo. That's probably might be her stance.
Yeah, I think that's probably right.
My parents tell me with they always call me Daniel, never Dan or Danny, and that was their stance. Was if we wanted to call you Danny, that would be on your birth certificate.
And to follow this up, this comes from one of our good friends, friend of the Holler, Ricky Hurtado. I think you might know Ricky. He wants to know, if elected, are you going to be signing things Maurice Mo Green, or are you going to be signing things Mo Green?
So the way that I sign things are either with Maurice Green or just simply Mo.
Okay.
So I don't ever really do Mo Green.
Okay. Okay. Well,
now-
there's your answer, Ricky.
Now that we've done the tough questions,
Okay, all right.
let's do some softballs.
All right, here we go.
So, you've got this extensive background, former superintendent, executive director of a large philanthropic organization. How do you plan to utilize this experience to drive transformative changes within the North Carolina Department of Public Instruction?
Great. So I will do sort of what I did when I was superintendent of Guilford County Schools, and that is to first listen, learn, and then lead. It's a brand, if you will, that started there and continued when I was with the Z. Smith Reynolds Foundation, and that is Mo Wants to Know. So the very first thing I try to do is be sure that I'm hearing what the concerns are, hearing what the success points are, understand the vision and thoughts that people have that they want to see for our public school system. Now, in this instance, I'll also be bringing forward a vision, and it's actually one that we did utilize in Guilford County Schools because I do think that it is something that can be transferred to the state level, and that is to utilize a quote from Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., intelligence plus character, that is the goal of true education. And so within that, you begin to already hear that we're going to set the frame around academic achievement and also around character development. So that's the way we'll sort of set the vision, if you will. But the actual strategies and all of the initiatives that we might employ, while we certainly have some that we would lay out, we're going to allow our state, our community, if you will, to help inform what that begins to look like. We'll also set, along with that vision that I just laid out, a expectation, and that expectation will be excellence. That our children deserve nothing less. And so whatever we do, we're not trying to do it at an average level or mediocre level. We're trying to be the very best we can be at whatever we do. Now, we recognize that you don't always get there.
That's right.
And I appreciate that. And so I don't want to, suggest that we're going to get there on day one. But once you start to shift that mindset, it's amazing how wonderful things can happen that will elevate the performance of everybody, including our educators and certainly our students. I think we can get our parents and community engaged in this work in pretty tremendous ways as well.
Yeah, I have
go ahead.
some friends that work in Guilford County Schools, and they were there when you first started as superintendent. And just going back to the Mo Wants to Know, they were talking about how when you first started, you made a point to go to all the teachers and talk to them and meet them where they were. Yes, and we hear that so often in just organizing, where the leadership needs to meet the people where they were. And so I think it was just a testament where you use this on your stump speech and your platform that Mo Wants to Know, but there is evidence that you have done what you are saying you're going to do. And I find that very admirable.
Well, thank you. Thank you. It is, and it turns out that if you're willing to listen, there is so much out there that can be utilized in very positive ways. And you ought to be willing, at least for me, I'll speak for myself, listen to folks from all different vantage points, experiences, as opposed to saying I'm only going to listen to folks that may think like me or think
Mm-hmm.
similar to me, but rather invite in everybody. You don't necessarily take everyone's thoughts, right? But you can find nuggets that can be utilized, that can be pieced together with other things that can make really incredible transformations for schools and ultimately school districts. And in this case now, the entire state system is the plan.
So you have this this model of listen, learn, lead. Kind of feels like in the campaign season, that's kind of the listening section. And maybe I'm sure you listen once you get elected, but you're doing a lot of listening right now across the state. I was looking at your social media, and you are like, I guess every statewide candidate who's really doing the work. You're a road warrior. You're out there a lot meeting folks and talking to folks. And I'm curious to know, what are you hearing?
So hearing any number of things. So I would certainly lift up deep concerns with the funding in our public school system, deep concerns about the funding for our educators, and the level of respect given to our educators. Deep concern about, quite honestly, my opponent. My opponent, I think, is put squarely in focus whether we want to have public schools. And so there are lots of folks who are saying, well, wasn't that a question that we'd answered many, many years ago? That
It doesn't
absolutely
seem like a question you would even be asked on the campaign trail, right?
Correct.
Like, do I want to run an organization whose existence I am skeptical of in terms of its value?
Yeah, and so so that there have been lots of conversations, lots of concern lifted up about that as I've gone forward, which I think has done a couple of things. One, it has allowed. I mean, certainly, I think it's a sad commentary that we're having to have the conversation. But two, I think it's actually an inspiring moment for those who actually truly believe in public education and the transformative value that it has, to be able to say, oh, well, wait a minute. Maybe we have taken for granted what we've been doing, and now's a moment to just actually go back and say, oh, this is critically important, and we want to stand up for it and then figure out how to celebrate and certainly what improvements we want to make with it as well. So those are, I mean, there are many other things that folks lift up. Yeah, academic achievement, as an example, being another one.
If it's not too early,
Go ahead.
I would love to talk briefly about the state of your race, about your opponent. For folks who may not have been following the race for state's superintendent of public schools, it's pretty spicy. I think it is not the race that anybody would have predicted a year ago, because there was an upset in the primary for folks who
The Republican primary.
in the Republican primary. The incumbent, Catherine Truitt, is not running against you. She was running for re-election, but she lost her primary to a candidate that has a lot of people. I mean, there's wide concern, and you just spoke to this. You just talked about this, right? Could you tell folks a little bit about why this is such a consequential race? I mean, it's an important office in any election season, but this year it's especially important because there's such a stark contrast between your vision and your opponent's vision. And I think your opponent would agree with that statement. I mean, I think she would agree that there's a very stark choice.
I mean, I've heard you speak many times, Mo, where you say, like, this is the soul of education that this race is about. So, yeah, I would love to hear a little bit about what's going on between you and the other side.
Yeah. So, what I'll do is I'll talk about maybe the contrast between the two of us and then why it becomes so critically important when you think about public education.
All right, I'm buckling up. I'm ready.
All right, here we go. So I'll talk about three things. One will be experience. I'll talk about belief in our public schools, and then I'll also talk about character. And then all that is surrounding then, where we want to go with public education, right? So with regards to experience, you've lifted up a little bit about my experience in the intro. Certainly have been honored to have been the superintendent of Guilford County Schools and the deputy superintendent and general counsel for Charlotte-Mecklenburg Schools, executive director for the Z. Smith Reynolds Foundation, and also then served on any number of boards that focus on trying to support public education, homeless students, the arts, athletics. Served as the president of the North Carolina High School Athletic Association.
Word.
Community support, media, policy. My opponent, she homeschools her children. Nothing against homeschooling.
I was going to say, there's no animosity there when it
Absolutely
comes to
not. The issue becomes, however, that this position that we're both running for is the chief administrative officer for public schools for the state of North Carolina. It is the position that helps to guide and oversee our public schools, 2,500 schools, 1.4 plus million students. Administers a budget of $11 billion annually. And so the experience between the two of us is just dramatically different. Second, then, is belief in our public schools. My wife and I, we put our children in our public schools. I wrote a letter even acknowledging the great work that our public school educators had done in educating our children when our youngest graduated from high schools. A letter written to Charlotte-Mecklenburg schools where they started and Guilford County schools where they ended. Folks have called it a love letter to public school educators. It is. I mean, so I believe in our public schools, right?
Oh, for
yeah,
sure.
And I hope that those then
I mean,
data
your mama was a
points-
public school teacher.
Mother was a public school educator, special education educator, and a noted one. But it's remarkable then that my opponent, these are her words, so I'm not trying to add to things.
Sure.
When I say that she's called our public schools cesspools of evil, lies, and deception, and call our teachers groomers, and indoctrination centers for our schools, and socialist machines, and on and on and on, encouraging our parents not to even send their children to our public schools. And so I do believe that belief in our public schools, if you want to advocate for them, you ought to believe in them. And then third and finally, this character, which y'all have touched on, and I mentioned as well what we did in Guilford County Schools, really trying to make character development equally as important as academic outcomes and what we would take to the state level, compared to my opponent, who is called, she took her own children to the insurrection at the U.S. Capitol on January 6, 2021.
That was a hell of a field trip.
Yeah.
I mean, that's
It comes back from that, however, where there was loss of life, puts her own self on video, right? And essentially says, President Trump, you're in office for 2 more weeks, can set aside the U.S. Constitution.
That's right.
You should invoke the Insurrection Act, which is essentially to bring in the military and have the military rule our country, and arrest for treason anyone who helped certify the 2020 election. And this is, in other instances, has called for the executions of many. President Biden, Governor Cooper, President Barack Obama called for the public execution on pay-per-view of him. I could go on and on and on, but those, I think, begin to suggest the distinctions and the difference with the two of us. And then you get to, even if you want to start saying, well, okay, somehow or another, this person still is okay to be our leader, then we get to some more sort of policy points. Like, for example, she's called for the abolishment of the State Board of Public Education. So the very entity that would actually set the policies and procedures, along with working with the state superintendent for our public schools. She has said things like, whether we should be providing free meals to our students, right? If you think about the vast number of kids in our state that are hungry when they come to school, and for them to access the educational opportunities that we want them to access, if they are hungry, they're not going to be able to do that effectively, right? And so this gets to sort of core questions about what do we want for our public. And, I could go on and on about whether she thinks that we should have, for example, counselors and other mental health professionals working with our students at a very time where I would submit to you, we need more of that with our kids. They are going, many of them, through real challenging situations and need help in working through those challenging situations in their mind. So these are examples of, even when you get to some of these, what I would say, policy questions, where there is a clear and distinct difference between the two of us.
Yeah, I think you make, one, I appreciate you breaking that down between the experience, the values, and the policy, and just those three different approaches, right?
And character.
And yeah, right, exactly. I would, obviously I'm not going to ask you to read anybody's mind, but, when the tweets came out about pay-per-view executions of Barack Obama, Roy Cooper, when the January 6th video came out, I watch all of this, and I'm trying to understand why Michelle Morrow, why your opponent ran for this job. And I'm curious, do you spend any time trying to understand why this is important to her, or why her approach to politics? Because it seems like, y'all are clearly starting at very, very different places. You're starting in different universes. And do you ever spend time kind of theorizing as to kind of what the framework is of her worldview, or what that's like? Because it's such a stark contrast.
Sure. And yes, I actually have tried to do that. And it gets back to sort of my methodology, which is probably just how I orient myself in general. Is I'm one of these that's like, I'm curious as to, and I want to listen and learn, and maybe there's some nugget there that I can make sense of, that will make sense of why someone will want to run for this position. But then it's challenging to figure out where I can find that, sense of this is why she wants to run for this position. She's espoused certain things. You can go on her website and you certainly can see some of the things that she certainly has said, but it doesn't, even some of that would raise deep questions, but these are such fundamental issues that it's just sort of hard to go, well,
how'd you get there?
Right.
Yeah,
and why would you want to be next to our children? When you have, leaders talk about words matter, right? People will do certain things based on what leaders say. And so you've got someone who wants to be the leader over our schools talking about executing people, right? When you talk about we're trying to provide safe and secure learning environments for our children, and we're talking about, again, executing folks. And talking about certain of our kids, or talking about people. I haven't even lifted up some of the things she said about, certain groups of folks, LGBTQ community, certain religions. Everyone should feel welcome as students in our schools.
Period.
And so, And so I'm bewildered.
So I think this goes to kind of what you were talking about earlier, of how you want to listen and try to pull out nuggets. So instead of trying to understand why she's running, if you get elected, she won her primary. And there are clearly people that are going to have kids in public schools that think you're not the right fit, and it should have been her. So how do we bridge that gap to help them feel more comfortable with sending their kids to public school?
Absolutely. So, again, I tell folks this all the time. At this point in my career, my resume has to speak for itself.
I agree.
And so what my resume will suggest to you is, when I became superintendent of Guilford County Schools, I actually came in on a 7-4 vote. There were folks who did not want me as their candidate to be their next superintendent. And I think those then reflected many folks in the community as well that didn't want me to be their next superintendent, right? And so that's where the way that I operate is the way that I try to bring people along, because, I listened to the 4 along with the 7 who voted for me, tried to understand why it is that they might have wanted someone else, what their concerns were, tried to be sure then to understand what they were hoping to see in our public schools going forward, and how we might be able to do some things together. To the point that, the 7-4 vote months later, folks would say, you can look it up, it became 11-0. And, board members saying, I made a mistake.
Changing hearts and minds.
And so I can't promise that that's going to happen in this instance.
How did that feel, by the way, when that 11-0 vote comes up?
Yeah, so
that must have felt pretty good.
Yeah, it is. it certainly felt good.
Yeah,
sure.
Yeah, but it also, I think, reminds us of, if you're true to what you're going to try to do, that if you're focused on children and their academic outcomes, and in this instance also developing their character, if you try to operate with integrity, I'm not going to say every vote on every issue was unanimous, but folks really, I think, began to get the sense that I'm going to try to do right by your children. Right. And so that's the way I'm going to operate. I'm going to go where whatever percentage of folks who don't vote for me are. I'll be in their communities. I'll listen to them. I'm not afraid to go anywhere and have the conversations with folks that we must have, and try to pull out the nuggets. Hopefully they can hear a nugget of something that they can say, well, maybe Mo ain't so bad. Maybe we can work with this fella on at least these issues as we try to move public education forward.
Well, I think that's a good segue, and I appreciate that. You talked about when you went around the state, or been going around the state talking to teachers and public school parents about a lot of their issues and concerns, and one of them is funding, and funding for our teachers, and funding for just our schools in general. And so if you get elected, I don't foresee this election cycle that we're going to the Democrats are going to become the majority party, right? So you might be working with a General Assembly that is largely Republican. How are you going to help with this? What is your plan to work for this funding advocacy, to try to bring in? Because they will tout right now, the GA, that this is the most money we've ever given to schools or education, but we know we're still vastly underfunded. So how are you going to, if elected, maneuver yourself in those waters?
Sure. So, first of all, I appreciate the question. I always tell folks, let's not assume something that hasn't come into fruition yet. So we may end up with more champions of public education,
which would be fantastic,
in our General Assembly, right? And so that should be the first thing, is be sure that we spend the time the next several weeks trying to have more champions of public education end up in our General Assembly. Now, assuming that we end up, as you say, with a General Assembly that is at least quite similar to what we have now, then what?
Right.
And so that's where we do a few things. Again, one is go back to how I've operated already and what I've shared already, which is I listen, I learn, and then I lead. I will be in communities across this state talking to whoever's elected in the General Assembly if they'll have me. Does not matter whether you're Republican, Democrat, et cetera, to have the kind of conversations that we can have about, well, why is it that you don't want to have increased funding? What is it that might be persuasive to you? What are the concerns? Can we have conversations around that and get beneath sort of the rhetoric or the top line responses, if you will, and try to dig in as to what's underneath that, right? Because that's
like him.
That's the way that we'll operate. Now, what I also will say is this: this is not a effort that is a most centric or most solo effort. This is going to require voices from many, many folks. And so part of what I'll do is to try to build a coalition that is across the board, across demographics, across political lines, that tries to utilize this moment where public education has been sort of the fundamental basis of it has been called into question, to say we've answered hopefully that question, and now then how do we move it forward? What are our places to move it forward? I think I tend to be one that on this particular thing, fairly optimistic that we can make some movement. It won't be as dramatic as probably I would want it to be, but I think when we can, we'll put some plans before folks that may be maybe a little bit different. Let me give you an example. One of the things that I think is critically important is that we focus on teacher and educator compensation. And I want to focus on base compensation first and figuring out how to raise the level of base compensation. And what has happened, I think, over many, many years is we've done really amazing things to try to, in some ways, get folks a little bit more compensation. We've tweaked this, we've done this, we removed this, we've added this. We have lots of incentives out there, and I want us to maybe say, maybe it's time for us to go back to square one, right? And figure out how we get the base compensation at a level that we're not sort of then trying to just simply figure out how to tack on things to make us get to a higher level of compensation, right? There will be some things that we probably will want to keep in place. There may be others that we will want to question. But it's not as though I'm opposed to incentives, for performance, but how about we start to utilize dollars like that and other things that we can find to say, how about we think about raising our base level of compensation, which I think will then have a dramatic impact on other things that we probably spend a few dollars here and another few dollars here trying to piece together an educational system that at the core needs to be reworked so that the most important component, which are our educators, are compensated at a level that we all think would be reasonably appropriate.
So I'm a teacher, and hopefully have some students listening to this conversation at some point whenever this is released. A little extra credit there. And if they are listening, they're probably from my civics class, which means we'll probably have talked, or U.S. history, which means we'll probably have talked about a lot of the conversations that are being had now across the country about designing curriculum, what kids should be taught, what they shouldn't be taught in some cases. And a question I think you are eminently qualified to discuss is, like, as the superintendent, you're on the State Board of Education. You're the leader of the State Board of Education. Is that right? Is that?
That's not exactly
right.
Not
okay, cool.
Exactly correct.
This is why I'm asking. So you can set me straight, and you can tell me, what does the State Board of Education do? Are they involved in curriculum at all? Shed some light on that.
Yeah, so the State Board is absolutely involved in curriculum. And so just for folks who may not have any sort of understanding of, sort of the structure, if you will.
Present company included.
Yeah, and so first of all, I want us to think about this as different from what happens at the local level.
Right.
Because at the local level, it's actually the local Board of Education that's elected, and they hire a superintendent.
Right.
Whereas at the state level, it's actually the state board is actually mostly appointed.
Okay.
There are two positions that are signed as members of the board by virtue of their positions. And the state superintendent is the elected individual. So, having set that framework,
Who appoints the board?
yeah, so it's primarily the governor that appoints most of the positions on the state board of education. So, having then sort of set that up, structure, the state board actually sets the policies that are utilized in running our school system. Now, the way that the the Constitution is written is essentially the state board has that sort of authority, subject to, using my own words here, but basically subject to whatever the General Assembly might decide to do. So the General Assembly also then, in increasing ways, has been more involved in setting laws that would be sort of traditionally education policy sort of things.
So would you say it's kind of like setting the strategic vision of the school system is kind of what the State Board of Education does, is kind of saying this is where we want to end up, and maybe the General Assembly or the local boards of education are more of the how we get there, or no? I'm not. So I would say you're not far off. Certainly, yes, that the state board does help set that vision. They can go deeper than that. In setting actual policies as well. And then the state superintendent is supposed to be the person that is essentially the chief administrator. So you think about like a CEO or a local superintendent that says, you've given us sort of what you want to have happen, we'll go about implementing it. Now, in this instance, the state superintendent also has the ability to help, put out guidance and help the state board think about direction on any number of things, from the standard course of study to the assessments that are given, the accountability measures that are utilized as well. So that those hopefully gives you some sense that's great.
Of the distinction.
I kind of tell me if I'm off on this. Assimilate it to like a board of trustees to a college or a university, where the dean and
the president of
the college is the one that has this vision,
is on the ground,
forward, makes it happen, and has a ton of sway, and can help pitch her or his ideas to the board of trustees, and then but the board of trustees ultimately have the decision for the president to administer said stuff.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good analogy. Again, the challenge is in this instance, where the difference is in most instances, like the example you've given, the board hires that person, so hires that chancellor or the president, right?
Well, here you're elected,
but here this person actually stands alone as a independent position,
voice of the people,
and I believe should be working. I think the most effective situation is when that state board and that elected person is working together to move things forward. But there is a distinction there that I think is important to recognize.
Well, I like that factoid. That's I was learned it today, Mo.
Yeah, likewise. Got me an education. Well, we are coming up kind of close to time. Do we want to do some like our kind of rapid fire stuff, or before we did, do we want to ask some more about?
I was just wanting to. So we did have a question talking about teacher retention, and I think you kind of hinted on that with the base pay, and that's a way to help retain teachers. But how in sex we have the future of education, right? And what's most thought. So education is often seen as a pathway to employment. It just seems a lot of people. Moreover, and I'm making big assumptions here, right? But a lot of my friends that are more right of center, they try to quantify children by their education and saying how much money can they make from teaching this or doing X. How do you envision schools balancing job preparation and teaching the critical thinking and citizenship and character of our kids, our pupils,
like things that aren't as easy to quantify in terms of dollars,
Correct.
like rate of return.
Right.
Yeah,
everybody wants to see rate of return.
Like you should study this because you can make this amount of money when you graduate.
That's right.
And that's a great question.
Yeah, and so it's from my vantage point, it's never been an either or. It's been a both and. Right. And so I think that education is not solely about trying to be sure folks get to the end of whatever that windy road is, let's say high school graduation, and say now go off and become employed. certainly that is important.
Sure.
But there's more to, I believe, education than that. And so what I think then education ought to do is develop both those skills that can make someone employable and things like character development that actually also will make folks
That's right.
better employees. And so one of the things that we did in Guilford County Schools, I believe that turned out to be a successful thing is we really leaned into something called service learning, which is this idea that our students can understand the issues in our community by doing service. You think about someone who might go and work in, a soup kitchen, and
Sounds like 4-H. We did that in
an
4-H.
Eagle
a
Scout
lot.
project.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
yeah, and so you do that service, right, and then you combine it with the learning, which is where the educational aspect comes in, because part of what we then did is we asked our students to answer prompt questions. Well, why? I mean, what did you do? Why
Reflection.
did you do it? Exactly. What could we do maybe as a community, either government dollars, non-governmental dollars, to help us be at a position where you don't have to have that, or that person doesn't have to be in the soup kitchen receiving a meal from you going forward, which I think begins to do a number of things. It actually calls on people to think about what you taught in the civics class, for example. You actually are writing this out. So you're doing, and so what you're also doing, I think, is beginning to develop those critical thinking skills in a different way that maybe folks don't really fully appreciate is happening, but indeed it is. At the same time, what have you done? There are skills around being sure you showed up at time at the soup kitchen, right? That you performed a duty as directed by the manager of the soup kitchen, right? And the list goes on, but you begin to see these are what? These are work development skills.
All employable traits.
All employable traits. So there are ways to do things in our educational system, all of which don't have to be measured, but can add to the person's ability to be employed, that develop critical thinking skills, develop empathy in their community in ways that I think makes a person a truly and completely educated person. And that's why I go back to that quote as to why this is the vision. It is from Dr. King about intelligence plus character, that being the goal of true education, is this sort of combination of these things that you want to have happen for each and every one of our students.
I really appreciate that answer, because when I was writing this question out, I was like, I don't know how I would answer this
me
question.
neither. I was genuinely curious to see where you're going to go with that. And one thing I will say is, we talked to a lot of candidates, a lot of folks running for various offices, and one thing that sticks out to me talking to you is you have I would say an extraordinarily refined and coherent and clear vision.
No question.
Right, you've got the mantra, you have a program that you've implemented on the county level, and you have a plan to implement on a state level. Like, you've really thought this through. This is a very fully fleshed out campaign, right? Yeah. And so it's the whole like listen, learn, lead. It just like I said, it just seems like a very fully fleshed out program.
I agree. Do you got a little bit of time for some rapid questions?
Absolutely.
All right, you want to hit the first one?
What is an album, not an artist or a song, but a musical album, a coherent set of songs that you think people should listen to?
Gosh, that's a great question.
I asked this because I've been on a thing recently where on Spotify, like, I stopped listening to playlists and I just listen to albums in their entirety now. And it's just and I used to do that in college, and it's just a fun way to approach music.
Oh, it is. They're in order
right.
for a reason.
For a reason, right? Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so having just come out of like my 50th re-listen of Pink Floyd's The Wall, that's why that question came to me.
Yeah, so I'm just going to – so let me just tell you what jumped in my mind.
Yeah, that's what we're wanting.
And so it's actually two albums, both by Stevie Wonder, Songs in the Key of Life and Music Aquarium, that yeah, just for whatever reason, those are the ones that just jumped in my mind.
Yeah.
That I think Stevie Wonder, first of all, has an amazing amount of talent, but the depth of his songwriting, and I don't know that he writes them all, but I mean the depth of them is just off the charts in my mind.
I mean, even if he doesn't write them, he puts himself into the song so fully,
correct,
artistically.
correct.
He
and
writes
so,
the majority of them.
yeah, and so those albums are the ones that that
Can't
just,
go wrong with them.
just jumped in my mind.
That was
If
an
you'd
awesome answer. That's great.
Yeah, I
I'm
mean,
with
it's
it.
interesting. It's a different, because a lot of folks will ask, "What's your favorite artist?" And I was ready to go. Well, here they are. But
Who's your favorite artist? Well, let's do that.
Yeah. Well, Luther Vandross.
Okay.
Certainly, Adele is another I'm a big fan of Adele. Prince would be a third that I would put out there. And then there's who else beyond that? But those would be the three that at the moment I would put at the top.
Super cool.
Well, I appreciate it. I won't have to fight Mo, because the other day I was spinning some Prince, and I was just really getting into it, and I was like, man, I'll fight anybody that tells me Prince sucks. And so
Are there Prince haters out there?
Yes, there's Prince haters out there, man.
okay.
And he plays
I just
just
haven't
about
met him yet.
every instrument.
Yeah.
I mean, he is just I like it. Good answer.
Yeah.
So Daniel said at the beginning of the show, you are a road warrior. When you're traveling across the state.
Is this the snack question?
It is. It's the snack question. You're stopping at Sheetz. You're stopping at wherever you're. What is Mo going in there and getting? What's the go-to snack and drink?
So I actually carry the snack with me. So
Like right now?
Yeah,
It's in your
I
pocket?
mean, no,
Okay.
like in my car. Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah,
I was like, whoa.
no.
Did you
I
bring enough
knew
to
this
share?
question was coming, right? No, so the snack that it's in the console of my car right now, is I actually just put together sort of a group of different types of nuts and
Well, medley.
a little medley of nuts. And water is.
You're well hydrated out there.
Yeah. My wife will kid me, because it's like, how many bottles of water can you have?
You
in
can
a
never have too
car
much.
in one time. And so that's the go-to.
I hear you. No Flaming Hot Cheetos and no Diet Mountain Dew.
No, sir. Those are those are not the what I'm going with.
Not the go-to.
on this trip.
Sure.
Yes, sir.
Well, Mo, thank you so much for being generous with your time, and I also want to say thanks. We booked this several months ago, and I really appreciate that. Man, it was on your calendar, and darn it, if we stuck to it. I mean, it was awesome. I really appreciate that, and this has been a really, really enjoyable and enlightening conversation. Thank you.
Great.
Yeah. So where can the listeners find you at?
Yeah, so you can go to mogreenfornc.com, and that's our website. And then there are various, obviously, off of that, you can get to our social media and learn more about me and what we're up to and where I'll be. We try to post some of the places that I'm planning to go to. You can reach out. There is a Mo Wants to Know segment on there. So folks, it's an interactive opportunity for folks to share both. I always like to ask, well, tell us something good, right? And then also tell us a concern if you have one as well. And so you can do that on our website as well, which will be very instructive if I'm elected as the next superintendent of public instruction for the state of North Carolina.
Well, before you go, we do have a little gift for you. Every guest of the Holler gets a parting gift in the form of a T-shirt from our friends at TS Designs. They're Alamance County's premier apparel company, and these shirts are kind of extraordinary. They are from a fair trade, fair pay supply chain that's entirely in the Carolinas, as they say, from dirt to shirt. So it's really ethical apparel that you feel good in and you feel good about, and everybody's a winner. So we got you a Hometown Holler piece of merch that you can wear with pride, and we're excited to send you on your way with something.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for that, and thank you for giving us this opportunity to spend some time with y'all.
Yeah, thanks for coming. We appreciate it.
Good.
See you soon, Mo.
Thank
care.
you. Bye-bye.
Bye.